Hello and welcome to Africa Business Weekly. It's been an eventful week in the continent with one of the biggest business stories being Sidi Ould Tah's swearing in as the 9th president of the African Development Bank and his 4 cardinal points guiding the first 100 days. I'm Tabitha Muthoni alongside my colleagues David Alabi and Karabo Mashabo as we bring you the latest developments shaping Africa's business landscape. Rwanda is celebrating Adesina 20, boosting conservation-led economic growth, while Kenyan banks navigate rising lending costs and digital banking trends. In South Africa, B20 has handed over 30 recommendations to the G20 ahead of this year's summit, marking a key moment for Africa's role in global economic cooperation. Quite a lot to unpack, so let us get started from Karabo in Johannesburg.
Thank you, Tabitha, and a very good evening. B20 South Africa has formally handed over 30 recommendations to the G20 presidency in what is considered a transformative moment for the continent and a significant development in global economic cooperation. The handover comes ahead of South Africa's hosting of the G20 summit this November. For more insights into the recommendations, CNBC Africa spoke to B20 Sherpa Cas Kuvadia.
So what we essentially did today is handed over to the Minister in the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, Minister 30 and are implementable, and they range from open trade to multilateralism to ensuring that the world collaborates to actually achieve inclusive economies. We have recommendations on finance for infrastructure, different on how to deal with Africa's debt and how rating agencies should be actually looking at risk issues on Africa from a data-driven and evidence point of view and not just perception point of view. We're looking at climate change and how we move towards clean energy, also having a just transition and agriculture issues and making a recommendation on that, as well as industrialization in South Africa and the continent, and then education and employment issues. So from all of those task forces, there's about 30 recommendations. We've ensured that the recommendations identify what needs to be implemented and what sort of now spend the next 2 months advocating for those recommendations and lobbying both the South African and G20 governments to try and get as many of those recommendations into their communique.
To what extent were you able to get in other business leaders, organizations to contribute to the messaging?
Well, this is a B20, so it's representing business in the G20 countries. We do have some sort of interaction with other 20s, with the Y20. We have interactions with some of the G20 structures so that we try to coordinate to the best we can. But these recommendations are essentially from C-suite business people and business organizations in the G20 countries, as well as C-suite business people from other parts of the continent.
Cas, one of the recommendations you speak about is you call for the global business community to take the lead in advocacy, in the advocacy phase. And I'm just asking, really almost like a troubleshooting, if you like, to what extent do you think this is possible given the fractured nature of global politics, which of course has impacted business or the ability of business to do business around the world without hindrance?
We are making recommendations that we believe are implementable. We believe that the G20 countries should be able to implement those recommendations utilizing some of the multilateral associations, global associations. We believe that those global associations, the multilateral associations, need to be restructured to represent the shifting economic dynamics.
Absa Group has announced strategic leadership appointments aimed at accelerating growth across the continent. One of the key moves sees Charles Roussan step into the role of Group Executive for Africa Regions, and he spoke to CNBC Africa's Zanella Morrison to discuss Absa's reorganization, its Pan-African ambitions, and what customers can expect.
It is another era, but I'd probably start by actually saying, you know, a lot of what we've been doing over the last 12 months really, Kenny has come in and has actually just amplified a lot of what we're doing and probably looking to speed it up. And none more so than, as you alluded to, which is the Africa opportunity, which, as he said, is a significant opportunity for us as a group and something that we probably haven't leveraged to the extent that we could have leveraged.
So Charles, I think that there are quite a number of elements. So you're looking at a few more appointments. What do they serve in the group sense? Is it the strategy around stabilizing, the strategy around growth, and group and Africa region as well? Your thoughts on what these changes are proposing for the internal leadership of the organization?
I think this is also, I guess, in the first point, which is with our clients and our customers. And we've certainly said that everything has to begin with those from a strategic point of view, where you're going to win, how you're going to win, to your strategy, and ultimately to your execution and your focus and your culture as an organization. So you want to be externally focused and you want to be focused on what matters, which is your customers and your clients. So Kenny was very clear when he came in that, he saw Africa as an opportunity, but we also need to do that. We needed to set the organization up in these three businesses. So a Pan-African PPB business, personal and private banking business, a Pan-African business banking business, and a Pan-African CIB, corporate and investment banking business, that allows us to maximize the opportunity and serve our clients and customers in a manner that is aligned to the strategy and where we want to go, and at the same time give a holistic experience and service to those customers across this. So I think that was what he came out with, and he spoke about a few weeks back, just before results. And then subsequent to that, you've now seen a couple of the announcements around individuals taking positions on that, including myself, looking at the Africa regions.
And how are you positioned for this, Charles? Your time at CIB, and what does it mean for, I suppose, your focus and how you see yourself, as you're saying, really enhance the market that's most important to you, which is the Africa region?
Yeah, look, I mean, I've been in Absa, as you alluded to, for a significant period of time, coming up for 19 years. So certainly I've seen a lot through this. I think, apart from the last year when I was in the interim CEO position, but before that, I'd spent 6 years running the corporate investment banking business. And one of the first changes that we actually made with that business was to run it on a Pan-African basis and not run it as a South African business and a business outside of South Africa, primarily because clients and customers want to be experienced across the continent in a single manner, single approach.
And those were just a few key stories that shape Southern Africa for this week. Until next week, it's back to you, Tabitha.
Thanks, Karabo. Over to Lagos now, where David has the latest from West Africa.
Hello, Tabitha. Now from our West Africa desk, this week opened with a spotlight on the swearing-in ceremony of Sidi Ould Tah as the 9th president of the African Development Bank, taken over from Adesina. Now we highlighted his 4 cardinal points, which include listening intently, launching a fast-track reform agenda, deepening partnerships and accelerating real solutions as the core priorities which will guide his presidency in the first 100 days of office. Johnson Chukwu, the Chief Executive Officer of Carry Asset Management, says the new president has a full task ahead as the continent continues to explore further financing opportunities to power key sectors.
If you look at what Adesina did in 10 years, which is the most important thing we'll be discussing today, because the person who is taken out from him, he has to actually build on what he has done. And one of the critical things that Adesina did was to increase the capital base of African Development Bank from just about $93 billion to about over $300 billion, about $318 billion. That gave the bank the capacity to intervene in several areas. And he followed that all that with his 5, what he call high 5 strategic focus, which is 1, light and power Africa,
All right, I think just sharing that the signing ceremony is happening right now in Abidjan. Let's just get the visuals from that and see and look at what's playing out. But then, interesting times there. Sidi Ould Tah coming on as the 9th president of the African Development Bank right now. All right, still coming from there, from Abidjan there, the signing ceremony.
And to make the oath valid, I will have to certify it. You will forgive us, it's a bit of a ritual. May I welcome the chairperson of the Board of Governors to read the record of the oath. Procès verbal.
Record of oath of office of the President. I, the undersigned, Ludovic Ngatse, acting in my capacity as the chairperson of the Board of Governors of the African Development Bank.
Yeah, looking at the visuals coming in there, we're seeing the 9th president of the African Development Bank, Sidi Ould Tah, being sworn in right now. Johnson, let's continue our conversation and looking at his trajectory. He's done 10 years at the development bank on the continent here now. He's taking a new challenge here. But looking at what the continent is facing, you know, and the development trajectory of the continent, you know, would you say what would the next 5 years look like for Africa?
Well, if you look at the development challenges in Africa, they are not materially shifted from what Adesina was tackling. And I think he needs to build on what Adesina was tackling. He needs to build on the progress made so far. Like I said earlier, Adesina was able to raise the capital base of African Development Bank from about 93 billion to about 313 billion, about 318 billion. But beyond that, he also had the 5 cardinal strategic agenda, which include Light Up and Power Africa. Today, Africa is still the dark continent, so he has to continue to build on that. Next is to feed Africa. Africa is still struggling to feed itself. We still not achieved that food sufficiency in Africa. Next is to industrialize Africa.
Next up, the Regional Director for Central Africa and Anglophone West Africa, the International Finance Corporation, Dalia Khalifa, says the IFC is dedicated to collaborating with strategic partners to develop the robust digital framework and focus investments needed to power Africa's artificial intelligence shift so that the continent can capture the full potential of the $180 billion AI opportunity.
You need to take a step back and see where is the rest of the world going in terms of its growth potentials. And then that will quickly bring you to Africa as being the place for where growth into the future, into the next 25 years, into the next 50 years. This week we're talking about artificial intelligence and digital, the energy around digitalization. And it's clear that in that context, Africa is really where the future is. Nigeria being at the center of that. So there's many pieces to that, whether it's talking about agriculture, whether you're talking about energy, whether you're talking about critical minerals, whether you're talking about technology. All of this comes to bear when we're talking about Africa, where the population is expected to go from 1.5 billion to 2.5 billion in the next 25 years, with 600 billion new entrants into the job market. Those are the engines of of growth.
Sure. And now let's talk about the sort of partnerships you explore and the feedback you've also gotten when we're looking at driving this robust framework. We need to unlock further potentials here. And then when we're talking about focused investment, where are the priorities for IFC?
So IFC looks at across all sectors for private sector growth. Right now, the objective here is job creation, jobs being the main engine for growth and transformation of societies, and enabling jobs for all who are in the job market and seeking it. As I mentioned, 600 million potential new entrants over the next 25 years. So the objective has to be squarely on job creation. And that's where we are driven in terms of where we would like to mobilize capital and funding. Over the past year, IFC mobilized $15 billion to the African continent. Of that, there was about $3.5 billion to Nigeria. Nigeria being one of the top 3 countries where IFC is focused on in terms of capital mobilization in Africa, and top 10 in the world.
And are there new announcements, because I'd asked that earlier on, but talking about new announcements and then in terms of what we should also expect near term when we're looking at achieving the right nexus around food, energy, food security, and also innovation. What are the announcements around this area, if there's any, and in terms of how do we pace ourselves right to ensure that we are unlocking further capital and not just lagging behind?
Well, the objective is not to pace ourselves. The objective is to, push down on the pedal and go as fast as we can, and that is really our intent. So you mentioned a number of very important sectors. As I said, we are looking at all of these sectors because they need to work together to enable the job creation that we're seeking. So if we focus on one area, let's say digital infrastructure, over the past 5 years, IFC has mobilized about $6 billion towards that sector alone. That it includes, about $1 billion focused on entrepreneurship and venture capital, which are the engines of growth to achieve innovation. So we really see that as a future, and our assets and our commitments have grown as a reflection of that on the continent.
And lastly, now I'd like to understand, because at the end of the day, when we're looking at the sort of nuances that have come through, you're also well positioned looking at Anglophone West Africa and then even the Central African region. But in terms of comparative analysis of the different markets you cover, what excites you the most from the different individual markets and as a collective?
Every market in Africa brings its strengths.
Well, that's it from here, Tabitha. It's back to you now.
Great perspectives there. Thanks, David. In East Africa, Rwanda's Adesina 20 celebrates rising mountain gorilla numbers, boosting tourism and agriculture. CNBC Africa's Absa spoke to Kado Sebunya, who is the CEO of the African Wildlife Foundation, on why conservation is a key economic opportunity.
This is one of the most successful conservation programs in the world. Just in the 1980s, there were about 400 gorillas. They were threatened to extinction. We look at them now in 2025, we have more than 1,200 mountain gorillas. So it's a very, it's actually, apart from the human species, it's the second most growing primate population among primates. So it's very encouraging. And Adesina is something that is really, Rwanda has really taken on very well, concept very well. And it hits a number of boxes. It involves communities, which conservation should be. It's a business, because it contributes greatly to GDP. But most importantly, it has humanized, if I may use that term, the mountain gorillas. They have a name. So that kinship kind of arrangement, and it brings more emotions to what we are doing. But it's a very well done program, and we are so proud as the African Wildlife Foundation to have been part of this journey for the last 40 years.
And conservation is not an element that people look at it lightly, because it involves investments.
Conservation is a business. You look at, we've done the valuation of the volcano national park. It contributes about 450 billion to the national economy. So it's a business, and not only in terms of tourism, which people focus on so much, but in terms of what it does to the rain partners of this country that contributes heavily to agricultural production, to the control of landslides, that could have cost a lot of money for the government to deal with. The energy sources, fresh water that is provided to agriculture, to life, to health. So it's a big, big, big economic engine for the country, and climate control. So it's a healthy, contributes to health, contributes to security, contributes to food security, contributes to the economy directly in terms of cash.
Excellent. And you literally took me to my next question, because many countries are still yet to mainstream conservation to be a national highlight, like what we've seen with Rwanda. Yeah. And I'd like to know what would be at stake if we don't take conservation seriously as a continent, and what opportunities does taking conservation seriously mean for the continent?
Because no business is going to survive on this planet with a rugged climate. That's given. That's science. So conservation is how we are going to survive, especially us as Africans on this tropical continent. We are not going to survive as human species without really managing our natural resources as we have them, because they contribute heavily to our survival as a species. But equally, we are not going to be able to conserve without economic development. Mm-hmm. So those two things are not so separate, and Rwanda has done a great job of not taking conservation as a side effect, a side project.
In Kenya, rising lending costs with the CBK rate at 15.24% and 4.15% inflation are shaping the banking sector. I spoke to Mwathi Kilonzo, MD of NCBA Investment Bank, on trends in digital banking, investment banking, and capital markets.
If I was to deal more specifically with NCBA Investment Bank and how we're dealing with our clients and helping them navigate the current trends at the moment, we're seeing that there's a real rush towards investments. So we are seeing a dramatic shift as the NSE, which was predominantly dominated by foreign participants, now driven by local participants. So our brokerage businesses has been doing well. We're also seeing that Kenyans are now actively looking for different types of investments. So our unit trust business and our wealth management businesses are seeing quite remarkable growth along those lines. So I think for us, what we're trying to do is position ourselves such that we're relevant to our clients and across the different business lines.
Indeed. And so would you say that you are adjusting the interest rates differently for SMEs versus the large corporates here? And also, how are the lending volumes being impacted at the same time?
Look, I think that if you look at CBK data, you can certainly see that private sector credit growth has been sluggish, and effects and measures to reduce the policy rate have really been trying to spur that, and you're seeing those efforts. So I think that is happening, and you can see it in the T-bill rate. The 91 T-bill is somewhere around 8%. This was something that not so long ago was in the double digits. And I think this is spurring all sorts of other different types of activities. So we may not be seeing it necessarily on the lending side, but certainly on the investment side, we are seeing activity as people start to look for yield.
And would you say that there are sectors that are doing extremely well compared to others? How is the resilience like here?
Look, I think certainly, anecdotally, you could see that tourism and our export businesses are doing well in Kenya. The data shows that coffee industry is strong, tourism has been strong as well. So certainly those sectors are doing well. I think what's always been sluggish is sectors such as manufacturing, but I think that's not a big surprise.
Yes, indeed, Mwathi. And looking at the risk-based credit pricing, it's now already in effect. What impact are we likely to see on matters lending, the credit risks, and also the access to finance for businesses and consumers? And at the same time, are we likely to see banks maybe passing higher risk premiums to borrowers or absorb part of the costs? What's the vis-a-vis here?
Look, I'll let the industry settle as this change comes through. Obviously, it's a new type of way of pricing loans, but I don't think it's reinventing the wheel relative to anything we've seen in the world. So it shouldn't be all too dramatic. So I think we'll give it a few months as the rollout continues and as banks communicate to their customers and their clients and they understand exactly how it's going to affect them. But having any sort of certainty on pricing of loans is not a bad thing at all. So I think overall for the economy, it's a very positive development.
And so based on that, would you say that banks are more prepared to implement this new model in an effective way?
I think banks obviously will always be able to satisfy their customers and do the best for their customers. So they'll, to best efforts, do everything that is necessary to implement it. A change in how loans are priced is not a new conversation. This is a conversation that started a very long time ago. The question was just the methodology and the formulas. So I think everyone has probably had a very good time to prepare themselves and work out how to implement it for their customers.
That's it for this week. You can catch all these stories and more at cnbcafrica.com. Thanks for joining us. Stay informed with Africa Business Weekly. I'm Tabitha Muthoni. See you next week.